And a good place to start is with one of my favorite opening lines of a book. The opening line, actually it's the opening line of Thales to Dewey. Try to aim it at the camera there. Whoops. There we go. Thales to Dewey by Gordon Haddon Clark. The opening line, Greek philosophy, began on May 28th, 585 BC at 6:13 in the evening. Now how could Professor Clark make this very specific claim? That's because on May 28th, 585 BC, now we know at 6:13 in the evening, I'm not sure they quite had the clocks set that precisely back in 585 BC, there was a solar eclipse. And the big deal about that solar eclipse is that a man named Thales, and I'll be giving you his name on the screen in just a minute, had predicted several years earlier that in the early evening of May 28th, 585 BC, that there would be a solar eclipse. Of course, he also didn't know it was going to be 585 BC, okay, but you get the point. It's a specific date, okay, and Thales had predicted there would be a solar eclipse. How could he do this? Because he had been to Egypt, and he had seen records of solar eclipses. The Egyptians had kept great records about solar eclipses when they had occurred, but they never looked for any kind of pattern or any kind of explanation for why solar eclipses had occurred. But as Thales studied those dates, he came across a pattern. There seems to be a pattern of repetition of when these solar eclipses happen. And so he went out on a limb, so to speak, and predicted a certain day on the calendar and a time of the day when there would be a solar eclipse, and years later, sure enough, there was a solar eclipse at that time. Up until this point, you see, when solar eclipses happened and you wanted to explain why they happened, you made up a story about, oh, the gods went to war with each other and one of them blocked out the sun or something like that. You had a mythological explanation. But now you have a move towards making a scientific explanation that eventually, and it didn't take the Greeks very long to figure out what was actually causing solar eclipses. And the guy who predicted the solar eclipse, I suppose because of this, is going to lead off our list of a group of philosophers we're going to call the pre-Socratic philosophers. I forgot I had this slide in here. You see how I recovered there? Pretty smooth move, huh? We're going to be talking about a group of philosophers called the pre-Socratics. They're called the pre-Socratic philosophers because they come before a man named Socrates, all right? And the first name on this list of pre-Socratics is the name Thales. He's the guy who had predicted that solar eclipse. He gets the kind of the honorary title of being the first philosopher or the first scientist. You know, probably not the first philosopher or the first scientist, but he gets that honorary title. He's the first person who writes a book that we would refer to as science or philosophy, and so he gets that honorary title of being the first philosopher or the first scientist. Thales starts a group of scientists, a group of philosophers called the materialists. And on the screen there I put early materialists because Thales starts the school. The early materialists asked the big question Thales asks, and that all the materialists ask, is what is stuff made out of? What is stuff in this physical world that we live in made out of? And the early materialists argued that everything is made out of one thing, one substance, what they called arche. That's a Greek word. That Greek word means a lot of different things. It can mean the beginning of something. It can mean the original something, the origin of something. It can refer to the elemental nature of something. It's hard to get one word, but the source, starting point, the substance that everything in the universe is made out of. One substance, what the Greeks call the arche, or the elemental starting point for everything in the physical world at least, the substance that the world is made out of. And the belief is that that one substance can be broken down into little pieces and then form the substances, the physicality of everything in this physical world. Now Thales argued that the arche of the universe, in other words, the substance that everything in the universe is made out of is water. That everything in the physical world is made up of one thing, water. Now, follow this line of thought with me. If everything in the world is made out of one thing, then it doesn't really matter what Thales calls it, okay? Because it's only one thing. But Thales calls this one thing water because, well, I think he calls it water because that's a way for him to communicate to you what point he's trying to make, okay? I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to communicate Thales' point here myself. But if Thales were here today, he might say something to you like this. He might say, you know what water is made out of? Water is made out of water, okay? You know what ice is made out of? Ice is made out of water. You know that what snow is made out of? Snow is made out of water. You know what steam is made out of? Steam is made out of water. If you've been on top of a mountain, you know what clouds are made out of. Clouds are made out of water. Each of these things, snow, steam, water, ice, what did I leave out? Clouds. They all have different temperatures. They have different textures. I mean, clouds are kind of like steam, but clouds are cold and steam is hot. Snow is cold and ice is cold, but snow is kind of fluffy and ice is really hard. But they're all made out of the same thing, water. Well, in that same way, Thales would say, everything else in the physical universe is made out of water. It's all made out of the same substance. Thales comes up with an experiment to demonstrate the things that don't look like they're made out of water are actually made out of water. That's why he's called the first scientist, right? Because scientists do experiments, all right? Thales takes a clay pot, a big clay pot, and he takes a bunch of dirt, and he weighs the dirt. The dirt weighs, let's just say 30 pounds. It doesn't matter. I'm making up the numbers because it doesn't matter. The numbers aren't important here. 30 pounds. So it's 30 pounds of dirt. He puts 30 pounds of dirt in the clay pot. And then he takes a young tree. And he digs up the young tree and he shakes all the dirt off the roots and he weighs the young tree. And the young tree weighs 10 pounds. It doesn't matter. And he takes that young tree and he plants the 10 pounds of young tree into the 30 pounds of dirt. And then he sets the clay pot out in his garden. And then he just lets it sit there. It doesn't really do anything to it. That's the lab prep. That's the work done to get the experiment going. And he leaves the tree in the clay pot, in the dirt, in the clay pot for, let's just say, 3 years. It doesn't matter. He doesn't really do anything with it. I mean, he keeps an eye on it. If maybe a couple of weeks go by and it hasn't rained, he'll pour a glass of water into the pot so that the tree doesn't die. That would run the experiment. But let's just say 3 years go by. And very carefully, he takes the tree out of the dirt, shakes all the dirt off the roots, and he weighs the tree. And now the tree weighs, well, let's just say 20 pounds, because it's grown, right? And then he weighs the dirt, and the dirt weighs 30 pounds, what it weighed at the start of the experiment. Well, you've got 10 pounds of tree there, 10 pounds of wood, that has to be made out of something. And what's the only thing going into the pot? Water. You look at the wood, you look at the tree, it doesn't look like it's made out of water, but that's the only thing going into the pot. It's not made out of the dirt. The dirt weighs the same. What's the only thing going into the pot? Water. Well, it's a good experiment. It follows the scientific method. You have a hypothesis and you get results and you can repeat the experiment and get the same results and all that kind of stuff that you learn about with the scientific method. And in fact, if it does sound kind of strange to you to think that water is what makes up trees, I mean, trees don't look like they're made out of water, that's pretty much what they're going to tell you in a biology class over in Building 2 on campus. What did they tell you over there? That because there is something else going into the pot that Thales isn't paying attention to. Okay. Well, actually, there's two things going into the pot that Thales isn't paying attention to. Can you think of what they are? Sunlight and air. Right? Sunlight and air. And what will scientists tell you today? Photosynthesis, right? How's that go? Craziest thing you ever thought of. Let's see, the carbon from the carbon dioxide in the air combines with the hydrogen in the water to form hydrocarbons, because that's what scientists call wood, hydrocarbons, because they can't just call it wood. They have to have a fancy name for it, so you think they're smarter than they are. So that forms hydrocarbons, and then that gives off oxygen from the carbon dioxide in the water, and somehow sunlight makes this all work. Sunlight does the magic stuff that takes the carbon and the hydrogen and combines them into wood. Now, if that sounds strange to you, and it should, well, that's what they'll tell you. Okay, so he's not all that far off. There was other stuff going into the pot that he wasn't paying attention to, which is one of the problems of the scientific method, right? Thales is focused on water, and there's all kinds of stuff going on that he's not paying any attention to at all. But it's not all that far off from what they'll tell you over in Building 2 today. To be honest, I'm not sure I buy it, but that's what they'll tell you. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just try it for yourself. Next time it rains at your house, wait for it to stop raining, and then go outside and find a puddle of water, and then wait for the clouds to break. Okay. And you've got the air there, you've got the water, you got the sunlight. I'm not seeing the mud puddle turn into a wood puddle. Just saying. Oh, the scientists say, but the sunlight only does the magic stuff when it's inside the plant cell. How does the sunlight know that it's in the plant cell so it can do the magic stuff? Well, anyway, that's what they're going to tell you over in Building 2.